Thank you for tuning in once again to his Vine and Victory podcast. My name is Kurt Olson. I'm your host. I'm coming to you on the early afternoon of February 26, 2025. A few things I want to bring to your attention here. The first one involves the big issue in the Trump administration that has been getting a lot of attention, and it involves deportations. And a lot of Americans would agree that these people who came from jail cells in Venezuela or are part of gangs in Mexico or Venezuela or somewhere else, yes, they should be deported, especially if they've committed crimes here in this country, or perhaps even committed crimes in the country where are from. But eventually, we were going to have a situation unfold where are being planned for people that was going to get attention, and you're going to be left asking, why did they follow through and do that? I don't know who dropped the ball at the Department of Homeland Security, but there are some people that needed to have some questions asked of them to find out why they were in the United States. And because the New York Times did a story on the 18th that focuses on Christian immigrants being deported from the U.S. back to Islamist countries, and the Christian Post followed up that story on the 21st, and I'm just going to read a few paragraphs of this. Christian converts from Islam are among migrants from countries hostile to Christianity who have been deported from the United States, initially to Panama, where they are isolated before possible deportation to their home countries, according to the New York Times. The February 18 article reported that at least 10 Christians from Iran were among more than 100 people put on a military plane last week for Panama, including migrants from Pakistan, Afghanistan, China, and Uzbekistan, respectively ranked 8th, 10th, 15th, and 25th on Open Doors World Watch list of the 50 countries where it is most dangerous to be a Christian. Iran, where leaving Islam is punishable by death under Sharia law, is ranked ninth on the list. This story basically goes on to talk about some people who were on a plane. Someone wrote in lipstick, "Help me." The New York Times reporter tracked the person down, and they're basically telling their story about how they shouldn't be deported because they basically fled religious persecution. And this is a story that I personally believe, because even though if you think the Trump administration is better than the Biden administration, government at its core is still incompetent. And this kind of thing was going to happen sooner or later. Um, and I, for one, believe this story. Um, I want to go next to a story from Christopher Rufo. This is incredible. It emerged on Monday, both in a story that Christopher Rufo and Hannah Grossman wrote at City Journal, and Chris Rufo has been doing a lot of follow up on X um, to the details of this story. Let me just read the headline. The NASA's secret sex chats. Intelligence officials maintained a chat room to discuss polyamory and transgender surgeries, internal documents read. If you are inclined to read this story, I'm going to let you read it on your own. I bring it to your attention because there are tremendous ramifications coming since this story broke on Monday. Tulsi Gabbard was on Jesse Waters' show on Fox News last night, and she was saying that the people who were involved in this, and it appears to be at least 100 and probably more, the people involved in this at the NSA, CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and who knows how many other intel agencies, these people are going to get fired. And their credentials are going to be taken from them. Because what was happening here was Chris Rufo got a current NSA employee and a retired NSA employee to spill the beans on and give him concrete information about conversations that were happening in chat rooms. And these intel officials across multiple agencies use a platform called IntelLink. And their job is to communicate on things regarding intelligence together and not talk about sex. So I just bring this story to your attention because there has been incredible ramifications from it since it went public on Monday. And if you are wanting to hunt down Chris Rufo on X, you are able to do that. I'm not going to read the story, but the story is there. The Elon Musk email focused on asking federal employees to provide details about what they're working on has generated quite a dust up. If you watch CNN, and my guess is a lot of people that perhaps watch me do not watch CNN with any kind of regularity, or MSNBC for that matter, but those two networks in particular have been losing their minds over this email. Now, here's one of the reasons why the legacy media has been losing credibility with the American people. They spend time on this, and an inordinate amount of time on this, when you had Americans in western North Carolina, parts of Tennessee, and even Florida and elsewhere that were days, weeks without federal assistance. And it seems to me there are some people in the media that have some mixed up priorities and need to get a little reacquaintance with some good old hard journalism. Do some of the hard work that's necessary to gain your credibility back. Next issue I want to talk about is the budget. Late last week and just last night, the Senate and then the House passed budget resolutions, and they did so because we have a continuing resolution coming up again. If you remember back in December, they wanted to do this massive omnibus bill, and when a big stink was raised over it by Elon Musk and others, it died. They passed basically a bare bones budget till sometime in March. And Trump is wanting to get the framework for a budget. So both bodies have been at it. And the House passed theirs. It was a close vote, but all the votes are on important matters are going to be close anyways, because that's the way the House is right now. I want to give attention to the Senate because Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, proposed $1.4 trillion in cuts to the Pentagon over 10 years. And there was a vote that happened on his amendment, and it didn't pass. I'm going to share with you some names in due course. But let's get to the dirty little secret about two things in government. Zero-based budgeting is not something you see in government in many cases. Zero-based budget means you start from zero, and that agency or whatever that government department or whatever is, they have to justify the amount that they're to receive. Baseline budgeting is what a lot of government does. There are increases that are automatically fixed into government spending. And worse, at the federal government, remember when they poured all that money, threw all that money at Americans back during COVID? Well, the federal government is still functioning on a budget from COVID levels, $7 trillion. There are some members of Congress that want that budget to go back to pre-COVID levels, which is $4.5 trillion. I would argue that's still way too much money, but um, that's one of the fights here. And the whole fiasco over DOGE is about the size, scope, and cost of government. And this is one of the things that is a part of the focus of this podcast, His Vine and Fig Tree. This title comes from a phrase that's used in 3 Old Testament verses and a phrase that George Washington used frequently in his writings. And His Vine and Fig Tree is about freedom. It's about your freedom to whatever you do for work, play, vacation, hobby, church, community activity, volunteering, whatever you do, you have the freedom to do it. The government has gotten too big, it's doing too much, and it's costing an awful lot of money. And when that happens, the American people lose their freedom. And that's what this budget fiasco is about. And that's what DOGE is about. But I want to share with you, pardon me, as I'm going to share with you 2 whiteboards. I'm going to read the names of the 29 Republicans who couldn't find themselves to vote for 1.4 trillion in cuts to the Pentagon over 10 years. I'm going to read last names of senators and the state. Banks, Indiana. Blackburn, Tennessee. Boozman, Arkansas. And again, these are Republicans who basically gave the swamp or the deep state, whatever you want to call it, a victory in funding. Boozman, Arkansas. Capito, West Virginia. Collins, Maine. Cornyn, Texas. Cotton, Arkansas. Kramer, North Dakota. Crapo, Idaho. Fisher, Nebraska. Graham, South Carolina. Grassley, Iowa. Hawley, Missouri. Hoven, North Dakota. Hyde Smith, Mississippi. Lankford, Oklahoma. Marshall, Kansas. McConnell, Kentucky. Moran, Kansas. Mullen, Oklahoma. Ricketts, Nebraska. Rounds, South Dakota. Scott, South Carolina. Sullivan, Alaska. Thune, South Dakota. Tillis, North Carolina. Wicker, Mississippi. Budd, North Carolina. And Murkowski, Alaska. Those are the 29 Republicans who voted against Rand Paul's amendment and essentially gave big government a victory. Now, these, of that group of 29, 13 of them are up for re-election in 2026. Capito, Collins, Cornyn, Cotton, Graham, Hyde Smith, Marshall, McConnell, Mullen, Ricketts, Rounds, Sullivan, and Tillis. Now, the only one in that list up for election in 26 that we know will not be the candidate is Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, north of 80 years old, is not running again. And Republicans can't even bring themselves to do the heavy lifting of restoring freedom to the American people over the size, scope, and cost of government. I'm telling you right now, mark my words, the fight in Congress over what DOGE reveals, don't be surprised. I don't like saying this because I want it to be wildly successful. But with these kinds of Republicans in power, let's just say I don't have confidence. Now, I'm going to share with you two things in the comments to this podcast. One is going to be a column by Matt Staver. Matt Staver is the head of Liberty Counsel. He is the person who was the first dean of the Liberty University Law School back in I think it was like 2006 to 14, and he now heads Liberty Counsel, a First Amendment related organization. Matt Staver wrote a column last week for the Christian Post that basically said what I said a week ago. The executive orders aren't enough. We need laws being passed and good ideas being put into law. Trust me on this. If the Congress doesn't get their act together, they are going to live to regret it. And so I'm going to include that in the comments to this podcast. I'm also going to include a video of 4 amazing young women playing instruments. If you are a music lover, especially if you're a music lover, you will want to see what those 4 women did in a simple musical piece. And I'll save it for that. Last thing I'm going to share with you is the fact that progress is being made. This podcast is now on Apple Podcasts. It's on Spotify. It's on YouTube. And in due course, I'm a one-person operation, folks. Again, I'm a one-person operation. And I'm trying to get Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook pages that are just dedicated to my columns and podcasts. And that's going to come in course. But again, I'm a one-person operation, and I can only get to things when I can. So there's all kinds of avenues to catch this podcast. And I thank you for watching. And I am dropping a column this Sunday. So until next time, God bless and goodbye.